Hi, it's Danny here. This is a video on the objectives of firms, which is from Economics A2 level Unit 3. I've actually recorded this video before, but I lost it, so I have to record it again, which is just sad, really. I'm sure you're familiar with all of these terms already, but we're going to go over them anyway for a quick recap. Profits are basically when a firm's revenue is greater than total costs, and to calculate it you'll do revenue minus costs, and anything left is profit. Total revenue you can find by timesing price by the number of products sold, equal to the area under a quantity price curve. If you take the area where they cross, and underneath that area, that is the total revenue. Average revenue is basically total revenue, which we calculated before, divided by the number of products sold. And marginal revenue is basically the addition to revenue from the production of one extra unit. Marginal revenue is a little more complicated. It's basically the addition to revenue from the production of one extra unit. And it's complicated because if you imagine the demand curve, it goes downwards, so the price that you get for each extra unit goes down, but because it's going downwards you have to sell all your units at this new price. So imagine Laura is selling chickens and she's got 5 chickens, and if she sells 5 chickens she can sell them for £10 each. Then she might acquire another chicken, and if she wants to sell 6 chickens she has to lower the price of it to £8 each. So with 5 chickens, the total revenue was 5 times 10, which is 50. With 6 chickens, the total revenue is 6 times 8, which is 48, which is actually a decrease. So the marginal revenue of selling that last chicken is actually negative £2. So in this case, if whatever a face is choosing between selling 5 chickens and 6 chickens, she should probably choose to only sell 5 chickens. That's the optimum number of chickens she can sell, because the marginal revenue of producing an extra chicken and selling an extra chicken is negative. It's important to note that revenues are very dependent on the market in which you're selling. In a perfectly competitive market, we've got an unlimited number of buyers and sellers, so everybody has to sell at the same price. If they sell above this price, they're going to be priced out of the market because everyone else is selling cheaper. And because that price at which they sell is the same as average revenue and marginal revenue, they can't sell below it or else they'll make a loss. So all units within a perfectly competitive market are sold at one price. Obviously this is hypothetical and would never actually exist. It's important to note that the average revenue is equal to the price, and average and marginal revenues are always constant, since all units are sold at the same price regardless of how many units you produce. In an imperfect market, the average revenue may well be equal to price, but average revenue will always be greater than marginal revenue, because demand is elastic up to a point and more units are sold as the price falls. The marginal revenue curve is always twice as steep as the average revenue curve, which is the same as the demand curve. Obviously, for a firm to sell more units, it has to lower its price, which is why the demand curve slopes downwards, and marginal revenue must therefore also slope downwards, since a fall in price will mean that the extra revenue gained from selling each extra unit will fall. This isn't the case in a perfectly competitive market because all units are sold at the same price. Before we move on to another fun diagram, let's look at some profit definitions. Supernormal profit is basically when a firm gets more than that required to ensure the continued supply of a good. So say a good costs £10 to supply, and that's including all the wages, all the opportunity costs and all that sort of thing, but the firm gets £20 maybe in revenue. That means that it's getting £10 of supernormal profit. It's an incentive for firms to enter the industry, although obviously as more firms enter the industry, competition means that prices are going to fall and revenues fall, and supernormal profit is basically eaten away. I believe we do that in the next section. And it also indicates a lack of competition. Obviously, if people are making supernormal profit, it means there aren't enough firms there keeping the price down, and it's not an ideal situation for the consumer. Normal profit is basically the amount that's required to keep factors of production employed in its present activity, or their present activity, in the long run. It's important to note this covers the opportunity cost of all factors used in the process. So basically, if Adiba's got a factory and she's earning £20 a year, pathetic effort there, Adiba, but she could be earning £50 a year somewhere else, then economists wouldn't consider her to be making profit because she could make more elsewhere. The opportunity cost is simply too great. Subnormal profit is basically anything less than that's required to ensure the supply of a good. So say Jennifer is earning £20 a year producing bananas, but it's costing her £40 a year to produce these bananas. She's making subnormal profit. She's making less profit than that's required to ensure the supply of goods. She's actually making a loss. This is an indication of allocative inefficiency. She's not supplying the correct sort of allocation of scarce resources. She's not using her resources where they'd be best needed. Shame on you, Jennifer. Shame on you. When a firm is producing and trying to maximise profit, it wants to sell where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. This diagram will basically show you why. So say we're producing at number 3 on the bottom there. That is where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, and you can see there the profit we're making is 0. On that unit, we're making £50 of revenue and £50 of cost. It's important to remember though that the cost includes normal profit, so it's worth producing that extra unit. If we only made 2 units, for example, whilst it would only be £50 in revenue and £30 in cost for that unit, and we're making a profit of £20, we're missing out on the extra normal profit we could be making if we produced an extra unit. Because marginal cost isn't equal to marginal revenue, it's less than marginal revenue, there's still room for us to step up and get a bit more extra revenue. You always want to keep producing up to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Obviously, if you go beyond that, for example, producing unit 4, the cost is going to be greater than the revenue, in which case you are going to make a loss there. We see a loss of £30, which obviously isn't great. So that's why it's so important to produce when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. If you remember one thing from this video, just remember marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That is the point at which you want to produce. If you produce any more, your costs are going to be greater than the extra revenue you gain. If you produce any less, your revenue isn't as maximised as it could be. You can make extra revenue for less than or equal cost. And since cost includes normal profit, you always do it up to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. As I've just said, in an ideal world, a firm that wants to profit maximise will choose to produce at the level of output where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. However, it's important to understand that this can lead to firms choosing to ignore the impact of negative externalities. They might try to produce as much as they can to get up to that level without considering the, for example, environmental damage they could be causing. Furthermore, say you pretend you're owning a farm that produces oranges. It's a great farm, that is. Would totally work in the UK. How are you going to know when marginal revenue equals marginal cost? How are you going to know the opportunity costs of all the other things you could be doing with your time and your money? It's impossible. So firms don't have the necessary information to make a rational choice. They've got imperfect information, so they can't profit maximise necessarily. It'd be actually more expensive and time consuming to seek profit maximisation. It's best just to make rough estimates, which means that sometimes firms will make a bit of extra loss, or they could be making potentially more profit. It's not ideal, but that is essentially what they're going to seek. Let us now consider the life of a public limited company. Dun, 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 dun. A public limited company is basically a firm owned by a group of shareholders, and shares can be traded between shareholders and holders of other shares. You can do what you want with your shares, you can sell them, buy them, do what you want. And shareholders actually have an annual general meeting where they make lots of decisions. So they can elect directors who set corporate policies, get angry at directors. I think I saw a video the other day of someone throwing an egg at a director of someone that owned a pension fund because he'd lost all his money, which was really unfortunate. And you can also discuss accounts and movements and that sort of thing. It's great for shareholders if the PLC makes a profit, because then it gets extra money, it gets financial returns on its dividends, which is always good. But sometimes activist shareholders, that's a cool group of people, actually they're not that cool, they're just a bit annoying, a bit shouty, but so you would be if it's your money. They want greater dividends and they sometimes attempt to oppose the management. They always want to push for more and more profit, which can lead to firms struggling with shareholder pressure. They can't meet their long-term objectives due to short-term shareholder pressure. So basically, you're a shareholder, you want your money now, whereas the firm might have a long-term plan for investment, so you might make a bit less profit this year in order to make massive profits next year. But a lot of shareholders can't see next year, they can only see this year. So that can happen. And some firms actually delist, which means removing their stock from the stock exchange to reduce this pressure. They say it's not worth the extra money, it's not worth the investment that we can get from having these shares. It's simply not worth it, it's putting too much pressure on us. Now let's look at some firm objectives, and we've got a lovely rainbow here to help us. The first one is satisficing, and I always think it says satisfying, and a lot of things are satisfying, but satisficing might not be, because it's when a firm has a satisfactory but not a maximum profit, so it could make more profit. And basically when a firm is satisficing, it's basically reducing the risk of activist shareholders, because it's getting profit within a set range. It says, look, this is the maximum profit we can make, and as long as we make somewhere between two levels which contain the maximum level of profit, we're going to be fine. It also reduced the risk of a hostile bid, so it's when shareholders attempt to sort of take over the firm. So it makes sure it's making enough profit to satisfy the customers and the shareholders, even not the customers. I think they'd rather be as little profit as possible. And it puts more emphasis on job security and perks necessarily than fighting for absolute maximum profit, because we know from what we said before, due to imperfect information and stuff, it is hard for firms to make maximum profit. So it's better to look at a wider variety of objectives and just make sure you're making a sustainable amount of profit, and an amount of profit that's going to make your shareholders and people happy. The next one is social responsibility, which is basically when a firm pays regard to the needs of stakeholders. So when you're thinking about a firm, it's actually often producing a lot of pollution. So it might be important for a firm to try to reduce its carbon footprint and the amount of greenhouse gases it's releasing and that sort of thing. Other stakeholders might be the staff, so it might give them perks, an extra holiday and free food. Anything for free food, I would do anything. I love free food. And finally, corporate citizenship activities promoting sustainability. So I know that Capital One, the bank, often does quite a lot to help its local community. So basically, social responsibility is when firms step outside of what is expected of them. It's not necessarily a focus on profit, it's a focus on making the world a better place, which is really nice ideology. Next one is sales maximisation theory. It's basically when managers want their firms to be as big as possible, because often managers get extra bonuses if their firms grow in market share or market power. So it might try to increase sale in order to maximise revenue to get this. So it might keep doing this even if marginal revenue is zero. It might just keep going. Part of this could be, short-term losses, because if you make short-term loss but in the process you get rid of some competition, in the long term you can sell for much higher prices and make massive gains. I can't see you ever needing to use organisational theory, but it's basically a theory that suggests that rather than constantly trying to change output and stuff like that in order to have maximum profit all the time, decisions that are made to do with changing output and stuff like that are made over a longer period of time. They're slower and reluctant to react to changes in the market, especially with larger firms, because they involve many people in decision-making processes, and different people have got different objectives and different goals they want to meet. So organisational theory suggests that rather than constantly changing, being very dynamic and able to react to changes, firms actually take things much more slowly. The next one is cost plus pricing, which basically suggests that firms follow a policy of non-maximisation by choice. So they set a price which is basically, it relates to the average cost and then plus a conventional markup in order to get a bit of profit, be able to pay staff and that sort of thing. And that means that prices can be slow to react to changes in the market because of the way firms have set prices. So even if their costs stay the same, if demand suddenly rises, because they've set it and it's cost plus pricing, so it's their cost plus an extra unit, even if demand's risen, so they could sell it for a lot more because of the system they're adopting in order to sell their stuff at a set price, they can be quite slow to change their price to react to this, which can lead to an excess of demand, which is great for the consumers that get the product, not so great if you don't. And the final one is long-run profit maximisation. So basically, firms seek respectability and they can't keep making changes, especially due to menu costs and stuff like that. If you keep changing your price, that is going to actually be quite expensive for you. So a firm might actually focus on long-term profits. It might try to grow for the future rather than making all the profit it can now. I mean, imagine if the price, demand for eggs changed and it went up for 1 week and down 1 week and then up a bit and down a bit. Imagine if the local supermarket kept changing the price to match this. You'd get really fed up and you'd probably start buying eggs in advance. It'd be really confusing, and also you'd be a bit iffy with them. You'd be like, well, that's a bit much for you to do that. A respectable firm will try to keep its prices more constant, although they will obviously gradually shift depending on long-term trends, but it won't be such short-term things as a firm that was totally trying to profit maximise every minute of the day might be. I'm really judging myself for that camel in the corner. It looks so inappropriate. It really shouldn't be there. That is a dodgy looking camel. Anyway, I really don't know why it's there. I made this PowerPoint a long time ago. Moving on to the growth of firms. Basically, a firm can increase its profits by reducing costs. Obviously, if you reduce your costs, you can reach your minimum efficient scale, you can exploit economies of scale. This is stuff that you're probably very familiar with. Also, a firm can increase profits by increasing market share, because obviously if it's selling more, then as long as it's making profit on everything it's selling, more profit is going to be coming back, and also it's going to be able to gain a dominant position in the market. So if you're selling more and more profit, it makes perfect sense, and that's what the camel agrees with, which is why it's drinking water. That's water there. That was one seriously phallic looking camel. Moving on to internal growth. Obviously, there's two different types of growth we can have: internal and external growth. And right now, we're going to look at internal growth. So you could use profits and loans to finance expansion over time, so investment and that sort of thing, which you could move straight on to the next one. You can increase the number of fixed and variable factors within a firm. So say Tom is selling pineapples and he's got 5 workers and he wants to grow, get a more dominant market share. He might employ another 10 workers. You go, Tom, you sell your pineapples. You could innovate, which is basically introducing new products and processes. Obviously, more products, that's dynamic efficiency. That's more changing products, that's going to increase demand from people who don't quite like what's not on offer right now. New processes are obviously going to be great because they could increase efficiency and stuff like that, helping you just be more efficient and therefore make more profit on the stuff you're selling. Also, if you could increase the geographic reach of the organisation, so if at the moment you're based in Loughborough and you want to expand your reach to Sheffield or something like that, that's something you could do, and obviously there's new markets over there you could get access to. Obviously these things could be slow due to market saturation. If everyone's trying to do this at once, you're probably not going to have much luck, and that's the same as the second one really. If you've got really strong competition, they're not going to let you expand your geographic reach of your organisation. I mean, particularly with supermarkets. I know that lots of supermarkets buy up land that they don't want, because say you've got a Tesco there and there's a bit of land right down the road from it. Obviously Tesco doesn't want to build there, but it wants to stop other people from building there, so it might buy it up. Obviously I'm not accusing Tesco of doing anything there, that's just an example of a hypothetical firm which could do something like that, except it's not really a hypothetical firm, but I'm sure you know what I mean. And if you've not got any profit, then you're going to find it quite hard to reinvest. If you're making, £1 profit a week, that's £1 of investment a week, it's probably not going to be great for you in terms of getting extra growth. External growth. We can have a takeover or a merger. A takeover is basically when one firm is forced to accept a deal by which it is taken over. So say you're there selling potatoes, maybe your name's Harvey, and then Jonathan comes along and he basically forces you to give over your stuff. So you might just buy out all of your potatoes or something. You might buy up all the shares if you've got the shares, but you probably don't because you're just a little potato seller. But for some reason you're forced to accept a deal. Maybe he offers you more money than you could hope to gain in the future, and then you've been taken over. And this is basically because, I don't know what his name was. Was his name Tom? Because Tom wants to take over the market for potatoes in this area. So Harvey, goes home with his little bit of money and he's happy for a bit, but his firm's gone, which really sucks for him. Anyway, moving on, that was a really stupid example. A merger is basically when two firms agree to come together, and that can be really great because you've got a bigger firm, more potential for profits and stuff. You could get economies of scale. Obviously you could get diseconomies too, but there are often loads of benefits. However, they often fail due to cultural and leadership differences. I mean, obviously firm cultures, to merge them together, that could be really difficult. And also leadership, if you've got two people that are used to having all the say and they come together, they're going to argue. If you could see me now, I've got my fingers here, I'm pretending that they're managers and I'm like having a fight with them, which is really weird. I'm really sorry about that. Poor communication and inability of companies to adapt to change. You might not want to adapt to the new methods that are used by the other factory, or you might not want to accept their pay package, or I don't know what you might not agree with. There's so many things you might not agree with. But we're going to look at mergers anyway. We're going to look at the different types of mergers. There's a diagram there which you probably can't read, but it's basically all the different types of mergers. So we can have horizontal integration, which is when two firms at the same stage of production combine. So say you've got Charlie and Bananas. That's a really stupid name for somebody, but Charlie and Bananas are both selling photo frames. Why is he called Bananas? Charlie and Bananas are both selling photo frames, and they think, oh, it'd be much better if we come together. So they come together to form one company, Banana Charlie, selling photo frames, and obviously because they're producing together, they can gain from economies of scale and stuff like that. You can also have conglomerate merger, which I believe is from Pink to the firm, which is basically when an unrelated firm, so a firm that's got no obvious connections, combine. So you might decide you want to diversify. So say Banana with its photo frames combines with Julietta with her rubbers. You can tell I'm literally looking around the room for inspiration here. That is a conglomerate merger because they've got no obvious connection. I suppose stationery perhaps. I don't know whether a photo frame counts as stationery really, but anyway, back on to our firm. Our firm could also do vertical integration, which is when two firms at a different stage of production combine. So backwards is when a firm combines with a firm at a previous production stage. So say you're producing CDs, you might combine with a firm that's producing the metal to go into the CDs. And then forward vertical integration is when a firm combines with a firm at the next production stage. So you're producing the CDs, they're producing the CD boxes. You're going to come together, and that is forward vertical integration. The final type of merger you could look at is called a lateral merger, which is basically a horizontal integration between businesses with similarities. So say you produce pencils, I produce rubbers, we come together, we're both producing very obvious stationery items. We're not the same sort of firm, it's not total horizontal integration because we're not at the same stage of production, we're producing different things, but it's an obvious sort of step for us to come together. Considerations for external growth. And we've just discussed all this external growth, but there's a lot of things we want to consider. The first one's actually positive, time constraints. External growth is so much faster than internal expansion. Imagine how long it takes to get your profits and reinvest them, and then take all the profits you get from that and reinvest it in order to get growth. Whereas if you just combine with another firm, straight away you could double your capacity. It could be really useful. Second one is cost. It's much cheaper to buy out another firm than to undertake investment, so that could be good. But also you could think about costs the other way around. If you are merging with a firm, you're going to lose out potentially with diseconomies of scale or just general disagreements and stuff, so consider the cost of that. Branding. Old brands can only be acquired through takeover, whereas if you want to build up a new brand, that's going to take a lot of time. So say I was selling baked beans and suddenly I got really rich and I decided to buy out Heinz. I can suddenly have the Heinz logo on all of my baked beans, which is highly unrealistic, but that'd be so much better than me building up Danny's beans. I mean, imagine that. Who would buy Danny's beans? I wouldn't buy Danny's beans because I can't cook. Next one is asset stripping. So a predator can sell off a firm's assets for more than it pays for them. So say I buy off a different firm, maybe it's a firm that sells speakers, because I have speakers on my desk, and maybe I pay £1 million for it, but I know what I'm buying, the assets I'm taking on are actually worth a bit more, and then I can sell them on for 1.5 million or however much extra, and that's an extra £0.5 million, which is quite a lot of money which I can then use. So you've got to be careful. If they're struggling, see they're struggling, buy their stuff and sell it for a lot more than they sold it to you for. And the final one is managerial. Managers love increasing market share because it means that people think they're doing really well, which means that they can get a pay rise. And for a lot of managers, that is what they want. They want more and more money. Obviously, there are a lot of managers that think about a lot of other things. But managers, it's great, obviously, for the business as well. And they care about the business, especially if they've got shares in it. But anything that can increase market share is usually seen as quite good for managers. Technological progress is limited by the rate of gross investment. Obviously, you can't get any more progress than you pay for, but it has three main components when it does exist. Increased productivity, so any new methods which can cause you to produce more in the same period of time. When your existing output's increasing quality, so say you've got a new machine which paints your pots a lot better than they were painted before, that's some technological progress even. And finally, when new goods and services become available, so say you suddenly get a machine that can produce electronic dartboards, that would be so cool. Yeah, they could count your points for you. I'm going to invent that. I'm going to put a patent on it. They're called patents, aren't they? I'm going to put a patent on it. Oh yes, businesswoman here. So yeah, this is when new goods and services become available, and obviously that's great for the consumer. That is some dynamic efficiency for you. It's important right now just to clarify there's a difference between invention and innovation. Invention is when you come up with a new idea, and innovation is when you put invention to commercial use. So you might invent a new machine, and then you're being innovative because you're using that machine to produce extra things. So maybe that'll lower the cost or increase the range of products. And right here we can see the impact in a diagram of technological investment. So let's say a firm is operating on the LRATC 1, so the long run average total cost 1, and it's producing at the point where it hits the short run average total cost curve 1, and then suddenly it invests in some new technology and it cuts costs. This new technology does quite a lot. So we move on to long run average total cost curve 2, which has obviously shifted us down a lot, which has also moved us down to long run average total cost curve 2 as well. So we're now on that red bit there, we're at C rather than B, so we're making a total saving of BC, which is obviously great for the firm because it means it's cut its costs a lot, so it can increase profit. It can also choose to lower prices as well, which could be great for the consumer. Woo! That's the end of the second topic in 10 in microeconomics, I believe, in Unit 3. Next time we'll be doing about competitive markets and perfect competition, which has got quite a few diagrams which look really complicated but are actually really easy to explain, so that should be fun and hopefully a bit shorter than this video, so it's got a bit longer than it was meant to be, but oh well. Hope it's helped. Hope your exam goes well. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.